Afternoon, my name's John Sloper and I run Help and Kindness, which is an organisation based in Dorset that helps people find support wherever they need it. And one of the things we've done over the past several years is support the Ukrainians who have come across to the UK and settled in Dorset, fleeing the war in Ukraine. We worked with public sector colleagues and community groups and with the hosts, as well as directly with Ukrainian refugees. We're super pleased to have Tatiana with us this afternoon, who is she works at Help and Kindness with me, and she and another colleague, Marina Dimitrevich, before have provided direct support to the community and allowed us to kind of create those connections and webs of support when people have come over to the UK. As a result, we've seen the enormous changes that people have experienced since they've been living in the UK, and all the challenges from the kind of practical official side of things to the cultural and emotional side of people settling into their communities, getting used to the British way of life. And this afternoon, we're really super pleased to welcome Alexander to speak to us about some of the issues that maybe we've started to identify, some of the themes around settling in, particularly around the psychological and emotional well-being of Ukrainians now living in the UK. Understanding a bit more about the trauma and the crisis experiences that people have experienced, and looking at how we can support one another and support those who are offering their homes and welcoming their communities to Ukrainian refugees in the UK. So over to you, Alexander. Very warm welcome and thank you for joining us again.
Hello, John. Hello, Tatiana. Hello, all participants. And I would like to start with my words of appreciation. Really, really great appreciation to the whole UK community for everything you've been doing for Ukrainian refugees. Yeah, who am I? I'm clinical and crisis psychologist, and I've been working in the sector of maritime industry and aviation safety since 2009. And I dealt with different types of crisis, and since 2014, I basically trained Ukrainian fire brigades and police officers in terms of the crisis response and psychological aspects of crisis response. So, and the idea of this webinar came up on the basis that, well, we discussed with Tatiana and John Sloper that there are a lot of issues or a misunderstanding from the end of Ukrainian refugees when they're addressing for help, which relates to mental health issues. And gradually we found out that there are two sides of the story. On the one hand, Ukrainians, they went through the process of trauma, of high level of stress, war, moving or migration to the other country with all consequences, and on another end, basically, trying to delve into the foreign culture, and on another hand, we have UK hosts who have been contributing and have been hosting and supporting Ukrainian, and they also may have some sort of level of compassionate fatigue, which we're going to touch upon very, very soon. Just briefly, for your understanding about myself, again, for more than 15 years now, I've been working in different countries, in different organizations, helping people. And unfortunately, I've been teaching clinical psychology, and I know what is the paradigm of trauma, what is the paradigm of crisis, and I've been teaching that. And unfortunately, at some stage in 2022, we together with my family and other Ukrainians, we faced that, and I saw how people went through that. Since the onset of war, I've been helping different organizations and large companies to organize sanctuaries. We call them sanctuaries for Ukrainian refugees. And we made calculations of my meetings, group meetings and counseling sessions with Ukrainians until the August 2023, and at that time I already had something more than 1,500 people who I spoke with, and that was a sort of a semi-structured interview that helped me to understand what people went through, what they were going through, and understand what happened to them, what has been happening on their mind. There is a classical paradigm which you're probably quite aware of. So we have pre-crisis, and usually we're living in a pre-crisis, and this is the time when we can do a lot to be prepared. And this is when we built up our perception of our future, because we built up our perception of our future based on our past experience. So, but we may build up some plans, we have dreams, we have something. And I remember the time being in Ukraine, most of the population, most of people living in Ukraine on 22nd of February 2022 were still okay. We had a little bit of anxiety about what may happen, but we were assured by government and everyone that no, there's no war. The full-scale war was impossible. And then night of 2024, our perception has changed. So there was a conflict in between of our anticipation of the future and the reality. So Ukraine was invaded, and it was a full-scale attack. So at the time when our brain, or we ourselves, face some situations which our brain interprets as dangerous for our well-being, for our lives, and for our values. And this time we have the very high level of stress hormones, and people our psyche is jumping into the stage of shock and denial. Yeah. So shock is something I'm pretty sure even those of you who are watching our webinar, and even though you've never faced, for instance, warlike events, but you had some sort of a sense in your life when you feel like, come on, this is a nightmare, wake me up. This is, it's not possible. This is, according to the theory, very quickly, this is due to the natural response of our brain, which defends ourselves, the whole system of the body, from the whole terror that we're facing. So that's why we are gradually plunging into the situation. And that's why we have the next stage after the shock and denial. Of course, some people may go into the stage of derealization and dissociation when they believe it's not happening to me, it's a nightmare, etc. Some of them may see themselves from the side, some individuals. So, and then we go into anger, then we go to frustration, but at some stage we go into the stage of realization, when we accept, yes, this is what happening, and this is what's happening to me, and then acknowledgement, if this is happening, let's look into what could be done, and then we go into the stage of adaptation, which is quite important stage for the survival of human beings, human being as creature, you know. So this is the, well, of course, the paradigm itself is not a line one, so it can be circular. We can go back to different stages, but the thing is, why I'm, trying to explain that, in order you understand that we are human beings and we go the same, more or less the same stages. Of course, it depends on our perception, how we perceive the world, how we understand the situation, how our brain interprets that. So in many cases, people decide to act. And this is basically where our survival skill is been set on, yeah. So many of Ukrainians have decided to escape, flee the war, and they seek their chance to go to other countries. Some of them, they reached UK, and basically when they arrived to your nice country, beautiful country, as far as you understand, they got into new, unfamiliar environment. Everything which is unfamiliar to our brain creates more pressure and more anxiety. Crisis itself is a rupture between the past and the future. So crisis itself is not necessarily bad. It can be good, it can be, but the thing of a crisis, the main point about crisis, is the bridge between who I was yesterday and who I'm supposed to become tomorrow is destroyed. So what does it mean? In a state of shock and deep stress, we lose a connection between the past and that was familiar and stable, disappears or become unreachable. So the future for Ukrainians at the time when war sets on, and when they arrived to new countries, and particularly in UK, the future became uncertain, and for many of them, they may feel even threatening. So it's crucial to understand that our sense of self in time breaks down. So we become suspended in the present with no grounding and no direction. But all the hosts who I knew, being in UK, all the community, UK community, you created very ambient atmosphere, hosting people, inviting them to your houses, providing them with food, all necessities, etc., 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 which was absolutely remarkable work, which was remarkable gestures. But for many Ukrainians, since, because of the critical situation they went through, they had a level of worry, the level of vigilance, the level of, because most of them, they've never been to UK, they did not understand your mentality, and for them that was a new land. What they go through, and well, they still, some of them are still going through. That's homesick, grief over home, family, and lost routines. That was in the very, very beginning, and probably most of them, they found a new routine. So as I said, and as probably you saw on the previous slide, our brain needs a routine. Every day we go the same routes, starting from the very early morning. Yeah, and if something breaks up, for instance, your TV set doesn't work, so it annoys you because it breaks up your routine. If you've got used to, I don't know, watching news on the TV in the morning, and then suddenly one morning it doesn't work, it breaks up your routine. So especially, for instance, if you would appreciate what happens to those who lost, their common way of life. So then the anxiety about safety of loved ones who are still in Ukraine comes to the place. Many of them have a guilty conscience about, or some of them even survival syndrome. I'm here and them are there, and did I have a right to go, etc., etc., etc. So feelings of guilt for being in a safety while others are not may prevail in some situation. Low self-esteem due to employment barriers or role change, because people who came to UK, there were different positions, and then language barrier, and then situation changed, etc., etc. So therefore, at some stage, they had sort of a loss of interest and joy, or even social withdrawal. Most of them, they have ruminations about, bad things may happen to their loved ones, or as I said, guilty conscience, overthinking, persistent worry, and of course, worry for their future. That's what we saw during, let's say, 2 years of war. What I see in a therapy now, there are a lot of Ukrainians who have adapted to life in UK. They've got used to that. Their children, they entered and they're studying in UK schools. Some of them, they're that age when they're sponge. They accept everything, very rapidly. Their English. I mean, I heard children, they speak English. Their English is much better than their Ukrainian, and now they have another worry. I mean, and of course, you heard about cases where Ukrainian they lost families, they lost connections, they have new families, they have new job role, etc., etc., etc. They change their life, and now they have new worry about what's gonna happen next. Or should we be able to stay in UK, or we're gonna be sent back? So this is, if I say the small Ukrainian community living in UK, it's like a boiling pot with very high level of anxiety. And I understand that this may affect the communication and relationship in between you dear hosts and some Ukrainians. But this is just for your understanding what happened to them. One more thing, to my point of view, very important. There's also a difference in the cultural difference, which may lead to misunderstanding. For instance, directness versus reserved communication style, which means that some of Ukrainians are more prone to what we call direct style. So Ukrainian communication often be more direct, especially when discussing practical needs or expressing dissatisfaction. And this could be perceived as abrupt or ungrateful in British culture, which tends to favor indirectness and politeness. So why it happens in times of crisis, many Ukrainians may prioritize clarity and efficiency over etiquette. Also, historical thing. Please don't forget that unfortunately we were part of Soviet Union. So just as a quick takeaway, don't interpret directness as rudeness. That's the difference in the culture. Also, trauma-related mistrust, which is sometimes the case, and this mainly relates to Ukrainians from occupied or war-affected regions. And they may show hesitation when dealing with system as local councils, schools, or even NHS. So historically, the problem, I mean, we had relates to our historical background, where people believe themselves to be separate from the government. They prefer to think that this way, because government, there was necessarily enemies. Just think about Stalin's repression. So that's why most of the Ukrainian population, they believe that, you know, the government is on the one side and Ukrainians on the other. So that's why that sort of mentality needs to be taken into consideration. In this case, patience and non-judgmental guidance are key. In these cases, what we recommended is the reassurance and practical explanations and step-by-step support in order they see that in UK it doesn't work the way it used to work in old Soviet Union and then in Ukraine. Also the part which is hospitality and pride, and also the role of women in Ukrainian culture. Ukrainians tending to place great value on personal dignity and self-reliance. You understand, the self-reliance comes also from this historical background, and also hospitality. So because you have majority of women who came into UK, many women are used to being central caretakers and decision makers in their families. And relying on strangers or receiving charity, sometimes that made them feel deeply uncomfortable. In the situations like that, small gestures that reinforce their autonomy can be helpful. And of course, emotional openness may come later. Now we are at the third year, and I understand that most of you understand Ukrainians and Ukrainian culture in some cases even better than I do. What we understand, or what I heard from some of the hosts, that's quite natural, what you may have experienced is a natural empathy and desire to help. And again, on behalf of all Ukrainians, my sincere appreciation to what you are doing. And this is very natural to help other people. Just briefly to explain you, you've probably heard that when our brain interprets something as threatening, there's life danger or something, then we have so-called strategy, which has been kicked off by our brain, which is freeze, flight, and fight. But that's what we've been usually talking about. But there is a fourth step, which means to take care about our tribe. And even though Ukrainians are not your tribe, but it's very natural to start, to unite and start supporting someone, because at this moment we have high level of oxytocin, which is the hormone which helps us to cope with our stress, and it prevents us from heart disease, etc., etc., etc. So people who are caring, people who are supporting, they are more healthy. Just very briefly. You may have felt something like overextension, doing too much or too long. Also frustration when support is not acknowledged or support seems to be not working. Confusion, sort of why are not improving, why are they upset when everything has been provided. And again, what I want to emphasize that these responses are absolutely normal. However, I just want to make you aware about secondary trauma and compassionate fatigue, who each of us may face. So the explanation is that when we're helping others, sometimes it may hurt. We call it secondary or vicarious trauma. And this occurs when we absorb the emotional pain of others through close empathy or continuous exposure to their distress. So as far as you understand, the word vicarious comes from the church. So the church of the priests, they faced numerous accounts from children who were exposed to sexual harassment, as we would say. And these stories, they affected them. So the history of this term comes from the church. However, so we see the secondary trauma in many cases of psychologists, psychiatrists, psychotherapists. The idea is you don't have to experience the trauma directly, but just witnessing or listening to others suffering can impact your own well-being. So that's crucially important to know. For instance, reading news or watching videos may also cause so-called secondary trauma. So what are the common signs of it? Intrusive thoughts or nightmares about someone else's trauma, feeling emotionally numb or overly reactive, avoidance of people or situations that trigger distress, feeling unsafe or overly alert, even without direct threat. So you need to remember and to take care about yourself, because as we say, the awareness makes difference. Also, there is a term which is compassionate fatigue. This is emotional and physical exhaustion that comes from caring for others over time, especially without enough rest or personal support. So common signs of it is irritability, withdrawal or guilt, reduced capacity to emphasize, feeling overwhelmed or emotionally shut down, loss of joy or energy. I want to stress it again that this is very natural reactions shown by even trained personnel, I mean trained psychologists, responders, etc. So how to support yourself without burning out? We need to establish clear emotional and practical boundaries, and which means that you're not able to help with everything. And it's okay to say, I don't know, or I need a little bit of a break myself. So co-presence is more powerful than fixing. So do not try to fix something for the others, because that may cause another problem. So it's while we were trained and then training responders, we also say involve people in some doable things which raise their self-esteem. And of course, another part is you may or you should encourage Ukrainian guests to reconnect with their own resilience and routines, like we're helping with setting up their connections and their groups in order they could start helping themselves. So building resilience together means normalize routines, meals, walks, shared activities, encourage small forward-looking actions like registering for classics, exploring communities. And of course, language matters. This is hard, plus we're figuring it out. Highlight the power of consistency and patience. John, I want to give you a floor, because that's the question. How hosts are been coping, and what they do in order to support themselves. That's the question.
Thanks, Alexander. I think for what we've seen in Dorset is the fact that we've tried to keep in step in a honest way about what has been needed at each stage. I think what you've described there represents some very familiar themes, and is a really, I think, quite beautiful way to kind of sum up some of the key areas that we've experienced. And I think the idea that this, you mentioned right at the beginning of crisis and adaptation not being linear, that it's a circle, and that you re-experience as you become more adapted to where you are, you then find another layer of adaptation that's required, and so on. And also, particularly with this horrendous situation with the Ukrainian war, is the fact that the future is changing rapidly, and the adaptations at a system level from our governments, our infrastructure providers, our health service, our local authorities, and so on, that as that changes, that raises other opportunities for things as well. So what started out as maybe we'll be home in 6 months, we're now thinking, well, what if I stay here forever? And there's a whole question then about how some of these issues that you've described today, how they then get another opportunity for kind of reflection and consideration. And some of the challenges seem to me to become even harder in terms of things like guilt, in terms of the understanding of what is home, and home becoming partly in the UK now, and for the children that are part of the families, that there's a cultural kind of welcome that we've seen, I think, which has been especially strong in the UK, actually. When we listen to stories from other parts of Europe, the UK has been particularly sensitive to welcoming people in and settling people into the British communities. But that brings a big challenge, because it builds those relationships, and then they become hard to put to one side and say, no, I'm still considering going home. I still, intend to return to Ukraine. And then a lot of questions start to arise around how that balances as well. So I find this description you've given of the process of adapting to trauma and crisis a very, very helpful one and very recognizable for some of the questions that we've encountered in our work at Help and Kindness, and what we're seeing at this point again in terms of those challenges and the questions that people are sharing with their hosts, and the hosts are sharing with, and the communities are sharing with Ukrainians that are now living here independently as well.
Yeah, true, absolutely. Yeah, and as I said, I have some examples where Ukrainians, they say now, our children have been going to UK school, and we find them unsurvivable if they be moved to other environments. So that's another part of the cultural differences. For instance, if 3 years ago we had a 6-year-old guy, now he's 9 years old, and mainly he speaks English. So and then there's a question, so that's where the anxiety comes from. And but the idea is to involve Ukrainians in supporting themselves, by giving them education in the basic level of psychology, for instance, and also to support your hosts, those who need a little bit of mental health support, or mental, let's say, psychological support.
I think that's really helpful, and I think that sense of building an awareness of what maybe hasn't properly been given very much attention, with all the busyness and the kind of practicalities that we've been facing, so that the early days when people initially arrived, there was so much kind of administration and official stuff to sort out, and the systems were still being built, and there was a lot of really huge demand for hosts and the communities to be practically involved. And you could see the outcome. You're getting the residence permits, you're getting the registrations with the GP, you're getting registrations with official stuff, and there's some really good practical outcomes. But the longer that things go on, the bigger issues start to come forward. So that identity question, the trauma, the psychological challenges, and also with the ongoing unfolding of what's been happening in Ukraine. Again, I'm very, very struck by what you described about the secondary trauma and the vicarious trauma, and the long-term kind of living alongside one another, bringing a challenge that we haven't had the opportunity, I don't think, to explore, which I'm very grateful that this webinar provides that space. Just like to say again, thank you so much to Alexander for sharing such a fascinating and insightful and really helpful framing of what's been experienced over these last 3 years, and very grateful for your wisdom and your compassion. And thank you to Tatiana for being supporting us together today with this webinar and our previous one with the Ukraine refugees in the UK. And thank you for joining us. Really pleased to have facilitated this and look forward to continuing the conversation.
Excellent. Thank you very much, John. Thank you very much, Tatiana. And thank you very much for all UK hosts that have been providing Ukrainians with this remarkable support. This is really, really appreciated.
Thank you so much, everyone. Bye for now.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.